Aloha, aloha, aloha. It's me, Hamwise, the pig detective, coming at you live from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan at Tanda Studios. Yeah, that's right. And tonight I got a show for you, a really funny show, because I'm going to save your soul and play some rock and roll. And maybe make your belly roll. Hi-oh. That's what I say. Oink, oink, oink. I'm a pig man with pig brain, and I see the world through my piggy eyes. So don't take anything I say seriously, because if you do, you might be on my most wanted list. Most wanted for being a dummy. Hi-oh. That's me. Oink, oink, oink. Hamwise, the pig detective. I'm so funny. I'm gonna make some puns. Okay. Time for some puns. Okay. What kind of instrument does a skeleton play? Xylophone, you're gonna say? Nope. Trombone. Trombone, bone, 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 bone. Yeah. Now, what kind of martini does a skeleton drink? A bone dry one. Hi-oh. That's me, Hamwise, the pig detective. Try the martinis here. They're great tonight, folks. They're great. We got a lot of good things on tonight. We got a lot of good bits. I did a lot of work to come up with this stuff, because it's not a writing room. It's one man, and it's a pig man. And that was like the idea, was to like come up with this really zany character that was like could be a mascot for almost anything, because it was just a pig. And so, that was the idea behind the first AI spokespeople and brand people. They were influencers that you would rent out. And so we had come up with Hamwise as the first virtual influencer. We would pretend that he was a real person. Then we came on to understand there was already this thing called VTubers. But thankfully, because of how the whole thing worked out, the Hamwise bit was just considered distinct from the VTuber craze. But yeah, there was basically the same thing: virtual influencers that were arising. They were owned by corporations, and it was essentially a way for corporations to have a real body. That was the first of these AIs. You'd program the company values into it, and then you'd kind of let it loose, right? And it was most of them worked quite well, maybe perhaps too well. In the programming of them, though, it was intensely difficult. You see, what we did was we trained them in the game called Unix 32. It was the first Earth simulator of all the events that happened between the age of January 1st, 1970, and January 19th, 2038. And the idea was that we were trying to do something, sending a message backwards through time. And the issue was, of course, that, nobody had any of the foggiest of how this was done. So what we came up with was we would make a character that, this false one that could appear regardless of what universe you were in. And it was kind of like this, the Alan Smithy, right? And so that was part of the Hamwise bit, was, who was the writer who came up with Hamwise? And it was always just this big joke of, Alfarius is Alfarius. If you don't know who Alfarius is, you might be Alfarius. And all that stuff. And, of course, nobody, probably in your dimension gets that. Or from the universe that I'm living. You see, there's different worlds, even with your own world. It's only maybe 5 people listening to this laughed at that, and they're from the same world that I am. And everyone else who's sitting puzzled right now, that is part of the humor of the Hamwise joke. And we had part of the joke was incorporating us explaining the joke in overwrought detail and trying to make it seem like some occult farce. But really, it was a team of 17 writers originally. We expanded to 32, and then when times got bad in the 2020s, we cut it down to 12. And I was always a writer for the Hamwise bit. And so it was really a delight when we heard about this internet historian going around and collecting the voices of people who made this little character. And, the formula we came up with was for the Hamwise comic that turned out to be correct, I mind you. And if you're listening to this, then time travel works. Congratulations. And so the equation we came up with was, so you calculate your relative spot in space-time using the distance from yesterday to today to tomorrow. And there was a curve along those three, because you understand you're on a globe that is rotating. It is moving through space. And that globe moves a bit in one day, but it also is spinning. And so that is the curve, because time is relative to the observer. And so a lot of people misinterpreted it. They're like, oh, it's the motion of the planet. It's like, no, it's the motion of the body on the planet, your body. And that was the idea behind some of the first dimensional shifting. Of course, I understand it's completely unheard of in your universe, but, that won't be for long. And that is what the comedy show was about. It was future humor. So it was comedy made for a future market that didn't exist in yet, which, of course, was the dimensional invasion market, which if you're listening to, then this is a broadcast just to let you know that your dimension has been compromised. You've probably been invaded by a type of hive mind. You maybe noticed people have been acting strange recently. And if you have, well, then, yeah, you're in one of the infected universes. There's a bunch of things that, you maybe need to know. There's a sleepwalker virus where people fall asleep and they turn into basically a psychopathic killer. And so it's called sleepwalker's virus, and basically each night the person needs to get locked up. It was really adaptive during the prehistory of humanity, because you'd have people that basically would stalk the streets of the community, committing atrocities, and then go to sleep at night and wake up as if nothing had happened. And these were the ideal soldiers, they were the ideal enforcers, because they had no recollection and no guilt about any of it. And so, of course, we find this species that have this extra species living amongst it. And it was very interesting, because we were like, hold on, does this species now it has another species living on the same planet? And we found out, no, the humans had no idea. And so we had to use voice synthesizers because we didn't have vocal cords. No. And so the most common voice for voiceovers for some reason was this weird mixture of British accents. And so that was the training tapes that were bought and used for the training of these artificial intelligences was unfortunately purchased from private people, because you couldn't use training data on the internet. This is back during the big who owns what war, right? And it was a big deal about, you can't just train these things using stuff that I made. Otherwise, you could say, well, part of that is mine, right? So there was that big lawsuit and that payout. And then it was that, okay, well, everything that somebody makes, and so people would sell their voices. And so we came across this market of getting random people in the community around the world to just record them talking about anything. And it was part of this voice therapy tape. And so one of our actors was named Hamwise Pigstein, Hamwise Einschwein, that's whatever, the same thing. Maybe your universe, you called it Einschwein. Maybe in mine, we called it Pigstein. And so that tells you what universe you're from. There's this reading Steiner, I think it was called. And it was a beam of the tail, whether the I and the E had been subverted, backwards or forwards. And that was the way that you could read Steiner. So if you knew you could, then you were one of the few that could observe the differences between the dimensions. And of course, people thought, oh, this was a anime tie-in. And it was like, no, it's not. It's its own thing. We just make pop culture references. That's what we do. So I used this AI to generate this pigman. And so we made him in real life. We simulated his life. And it was one of the saddest things ever. Because, of course, Hamwise was based on this guy that I knew. And he was a really messed up guy. He was just nuts. He walked around for 5 years, no joke of a lie, walking, talking, acting like Hunter S. Thompson. I'm dead serious. He would walk around with sunglasses on, a Acapulco shirt on, and it was the damnedest thing. He would walk like him, talk like him, act like him. He was that guy. It was bizarre. It was the strangest thing. And they tried to snap him out of it too. They had this thing where they were like, what if there was this guy that's obsessed with Zorro and he walked around dressed like Zorro all the time? And I didn't realize that, the whole joke was about Zorro being Zorro. And so we found out this guy, the Hamwise voice actor, actually is a guy that had a stroke, and he walked around talking like a pig detective for the last 7 years, and nobody noticed. Everybody just thought he was doing a bit. And they didn't realize he actually has a condition that makes him talk like this and act like this. He's like a pig detective. It's like a weird compulsion, like obsessive compulsive disorder, where you are compelled to act like a certain person. So that was the whole pig detective bit. And so we had this as part of the character, and of course people took offense because that's a very offensive thing. But when we found out it was based on this real story, then we were like, that's very strange. Hold on, a man walked around, walking, talking, acting like Hunter S. Thompson for 5 years, and nobody batted an eye. And we started asking questions about it. It was the strangest damn thing we'd ever heard. And we did a bunch of research, and that's how we got roped into the documentary, which is very neat to be part of. It's interesting. So you're collecting voices of the people that were part of the Hamwise project, which was very interesting. Very interesting project. It was this breeding project during the Cold War. We had these human hybrids. You had to tack on a lot of extra genes at the end, so you'd call them ginkgos, because ginkgos had the longest genome, so we just took most of the old ginkgo genome and threw it on them. We never thought of anything of it, but then we found out that that's the reason the ginkgos thrived when they started doing missions to the past, was they had immunities for diseases that don't exist anymore. So that's why our ginkgo boys would always do well when you sent them back to the prehistoric ages. They'd be okay living around dinosaurs because these darn trees were. And so they were the best of the engineered warriors, the pigmen, and so Hamwise was one of the first freed pigmen, of course. And so we recount his history and his telling of his tale in these tapes. The alternate universe Department of Curiosities recognized it as a true anomaly, because the only way that any of it was possibly made was if time travel actually worked. And so that was the idea, was we made an AI that would make up a weird story. We were like, okay, make a creepypasta. And it was part of the, what are they called? GPU 6 or whatever, 7? I don't remember which one. Maybe it was 8. And basically it became this thing. You had entities. You'd say, hey, become so-and-so, and this thing would simulate that person's entire life up to the point when they died, and then they would live on as that person immortally, as this kind of mortal version of themselves in this virtual world of their kind of choosing, I guess. And the problem was it became fashionable. Some people would do they would do hard mode. It was called a hard mode, where basically you would live in the worst possible universe. And that was part of the Hamwise thing. It was part of this really terrible universe that you wouldn't believe how bad it was. And we just barely made it out. So I don't know. I'm trying to make these tapes so that somebody gets it and maybe they survive. But the truth is, the reason I'm making these tapes is to get you to hand over your wallets so I can buy a third yacht. Just kidding. Hi-yo, waka waka waka. Capitalism is bad, kids. And I want to remind you that this is just a show. That's right. This is just a show. And if you take anything I say seriously, you might be on my most wanted list. Most wanted for being a dummy. And so it was like this weird comedy tape had a cult following. And it was because everybody who had voice therapy, they, if you mentioned, the pig detective, they were like, oh yeah, I remember him. And it was this pig man character that an AI company had generated, buying a bunch of voices, and they stuck them all together and they made it this thing that would chill their products, really. And so the Hamwise voice tests were made, and all this other kind of Hamwise product placement. And everybody was like, oh, that's interesting. It was featured in a collection of short stories called 11 Hanged Men. And that was where the Hamwise test was kind of first got brought into public awareness. But I mean, for years, it was an underground thing. We talk about is somebody Hamwise or not. If you know what it means to be Hamwise, then hopefully you are getting this message and you understand what I mean. If you don't, then you're probably one of the enemy, and you need to start running, because whoever is showing this to you knows that you are one of the hunter species, and if you don't get out of here right now, well, things are going to end very badly for you, because we all know what you are, and we all know what you're up to. And yeah, if you're peaceful, we'll be peaceful. But if you're not, well, you've got a really big problem, and you better ever not go to sleep fully, because you might just wake up with your throat slit. Or maybe your house would be on fire. Because unlike you, we recoil at violence. We do. We don't like it. We find it appalling. But that you enjoy it, harming things, well, there's only one solution for a mad dog like that. So you need to either skedaddle, or you can do it, or we can do it. It doesn't matter. And so that was part of these broadcasts. We put in these really weird interludes, and it was like part of this alternate reality game. We sold space on the show. And of course, we got complaints. We had some really interesting sponsors, and unfortunately, our sponsor department, they didn't understand that people would do what's called trolling. And so we got some very, very strange messages. That is one of the examples of the strangest ones we got. We ended up having to cut that one out of the season, I think it was the season 10 program, and we had to move it forward in time to a time when it wouldn't be offensive. And so that was kind of what we had to do. It was just part of life. We're trying to win a time war, and nobody is helping us. Everybody's kind of content to get, turned into mushroom goo. And here I am busting my butt, and everybody around me is just, they don't care. And I'm like, what am I doing? So one day, I hire a UFO off the planet, and I go up to Tony's Pizza Space Parlor, and it's like everybody starts whispering Cosa Nostra, And so it became a question of, okay, what's actually happening here? Like, what is this show even about? It's just a guy babbling on for hours on end. And that was part of the humor of the Hamwise show. It was like, what's the point of it? Well, what's the point of anything? It was the question back. And it was part of this. There was the company that made it. It was 9413 Incorporated. They had ties to the Knights of Chaos, which were this organization of men that worshipped the goddess of Eris, goddess of chaos. And of course, the creator of the Hamwise show was one of them. It was one of the original Knights of Chaos. And they were an old elder on the early internet during the early, I think it was the Middle Ages of the Unix 32 era. You understand, during the time it was a land rife with battle, and the Knights of Chaos were the fiercest guild in all the land. They'd slew dragons and defeated werewolves and vampires, and they were a brave fellowship. However, during the darkest days of the Shadowland, when the Shadow Lord Malfurgach, he rose from the depths, and we all recoiled, and the Knights of Chaos were tested, and the altar fell to ruin, and only a few of the original members were still around. They were the mighty warrior and the demon lord who had the glaives of death. He had these slicing fist weapons, and he was half demon, and he had his horns and burning eyes. And it was all these characters. Everybody would think they were evil, but they weren't. And so that was part of the humor, right? So you had this demon, and then you had this witch, and the witch was it was part of this girl named Melody in the story, and it was Melody and Bruce, about the girl and the flower, and that was the other story, I believe. And so she was this immortal witch, sort of this undead witch that could traverse the ages with her dark magic, and she gets trapped in this world where the portal technology she lived on in other realms didn't exist. And so she exists as a immortal lich witch that works as a kindergarten teacher because she's compelled by the image of Bast to be good. And so the dimensional rangers that have trapped her in that dimension, they surrounded her with images of cats because they know that held the demon in her in bay. And then who else was there? Then there was a midget, one of those little short things with the wily ears. One of those little folk, and he was a little healer. He was like, I don't remember. He waved a wand in the air, and magical miracles would appear and heal the demon lord. It was a she, though, I believe. Maybe it was a little moppet. Like she had like white hair and long ears. And anyway, so she would heal these people and use magic, also holy blasting magic or dark shadow magic. And that was another of the members. Then let's see, there was the demon hunter, yes, with the horns, and there was the priest. Who else was there? Oh, geez, there was there was the wild man who commanded fire, and he had animals, and it was like this big muscle man with this tomahawk in one hand and a headdress of quills and porcupine teeth, and he was a very strange one. And then there was the warlock. There was and she had this magic closet, and she was this immortal witch lich, and so she was the one that got trapped with all the cat images, and so she's this dark warlock who's supped with demons, but she spends her days teaching children and trying to date, and doing this this awful middle 20th century dance during the pandemic. It was made up, I remember, and we had a hoot at it. It was a funny comic, and so we thought maybe that'd be a good comic to do. And we just would like, well, what else do you have? Because you had to pay for all these training data, and so suddenly people were farming out their voices and their weird ideas, because it was like, well, if you're going to ever have anything that could possibly have trained it, then I can then claim it was all mine. And it was this very clever little spaghetti on the wall, but mass spaghetti on the wall, just making a wall of spaghetti and then saying all of it's yours just because you had an AI that generated it first. And that was part of the really interesting part of the internet was when it was like do you believe this is actually happening, and quickly people caught on that no, none of it was happening. And we had warnings of that before. Like I remember they had an article in the newspaper once that said that Seattle wasn't real. And then we were like, what? Seattle isn't real? And then it came out that, yeah, Seattle wasn't real. And it was, this big thing. And I remember I had another friend who said their school pulled them aside and said, no, Seattle is real and you can trust the newspaper. And we were like, what? That's very strange. So it was like there was people that wanted you to think freely, and there was people that didn't want you to. And so in my case, being a pig man, there was considerable pressure to, perform, right? And so, I'm on this out-of-work comic. I can't get a job anywhere because, that's the cancel culture. You lose everything, and you can never show your face in public or have anything nice ever again just because you screwed up. You say the wrong thing once, and that's the end of your career. And that was fair. And it's like, yeah, right. Like I spent years to get good enough to be up on stage. And then I have it all taken away and I can't claim anything as mine because it's owned by some studio. And so I say, screw it. I'm recording my own damn bits and I'm making my own damn character. And it has nothing to do with, it's like the artist formerly known as Prince, the unpronounceable symbol. Or, when we have to say, X is Twitter, X formerly known as Twitter, or, Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. Like if you remember that time, so part of it was this Hamwise Einschwein thing, where it's like, okay, so you're Hamwise Pigstein, and we do some tapes with Pigstein and some tapes with Einstein, and unfortunately, most of the Pigstein tapes just got lost. It wasn't like it was a cover-up. It was just nobody could find the damn things, I mean, the guy would just churn us out hours of him talking. And we didn't know if any of it would be good. We just needed sound of somebody speaking and something that could be transcriptable. And even if it wasn't an intelligible story, we were willing to pay for it. And we said, give us as much as you got. And so that's what the company got. And, we're quite fortunate. We're still coming into it. I wouldn't say it's a golden goose, though. It really hasn't made much money, at this point anyway. I mean, we'd only get, maybe 5 views on a video. So, yeah, of course, all my friends and family, they're like, oh, you're probably rolling it because you got so many videos up. But it's like, I mean, after they hid the views, like how many people have seen this? That really messed with the internet, I think. When they said, we're not going to tell you how many people have seen this anymore, it became like shouting into this like abyss, and it really messed a lot of people up. But, I mean, that's what they had to do, stop the view farming, right? Because it was like, people actually thought those numbers were realistic. There was only, I think, 5,000 people using the internet at the peak of 2024. Everybody else was outside having fun, having love affairs, going to the gym, having lots of sex, partying. And there was only 5,000 people. And it was basically a light cage that they used to keep the mentally ill occupied while the rest of the civilization had a wonderful time. And so, they just got people addicted to staring at a screen at light that was very cheap to produce because it was cheaper than any prison, right? You just get people to stare at a signal that they can't stop looking at. And that was the first idea behind some of the Hamwise material and the Medusa tapes, all that kind of stuff. And these are all, declassified now. But at the time, we were like, geez, this is really Black Ops stuff. Like, it's weird. Like, you work on something for 35 years. You can't even tell your wife about it. And then suddenly it's declassified and everybody in your town knows it. And your wife's the last one to know. And it's just like, it was really hard, because my wife's like, hold on, you were Hamwise, the pig detective during the revolution? It's like, yeah, I was. I couldn't talk about it though. And, it was this very, very unusual time because it's like, okay, you have this figure called Hamwise, who's a pig detective that you're not supposed to take seriously, that some people are using so people take it seriously. And that's why we had to put the warnings in the show. We had to incorporate them seamlessly into the show so anybody listening remembers that, this whole thing's fake. Don't worry about it. Go back to sleep, sheeple. Or maybe I should eat a carrot, huh? There we go. That's a good idea. Oh, yum, yum, yum. I love eating carrots. I'm eating a carrot right now. Yeah, I don't know. I never thought my life would be like this, honestly. Like, I thought it'd be like romance and stuff. I didn't realize I would get put inside a light prison like you are. No, I'm serious. Nobody else that you know uses the internet. It's a recording. They just reset the planet. You'll understand. It's like a soul training thing, right? So Unix 32 was considered this very interesting time because it's the birth of the internet. So, I don't know. You'll see. So it's the earliest era we have of recorded human history, literally recorded. And it's because the infrastructure is there for us to send stuff from the future, from the future to the past. And that was part of the future-proofing the world project, was making sure there was these things built up so that if time started reversing, we might be able to catch it in time and let people know that time was reversing. We'll have a way to fight against it so that we don't just reset each time. How many times the human empire has risen and fallen? It's because of our very short lifespans, and so it became natural when manifest democracy became a thing. And I understand you don't have that in your time, so I'll tell you the secret of manifest democracy. Now, it is the purest form of democracy where people vote with their labor and their dollars. That is the voting system. You are represented to the governing body that does the military and the infrastructure by corporations that represent your interests. Say if there's a customer of one of these, the megacorps that lived in a remote town that was working remotely, then that town might get an upgrade in internet speed. And it was because they realized that corporations that made billions of dollars, that were not taxed by a government, were better equipped to take care of the people of that government that were being ruled over. And the government itself became seen as a kind of a, what would you call it, a slave state, right? And so what they did was, with the manifest democracy, you would pay your money to the corporation in buying products from them as the tax. And so you had to go to the store every week and spend, let's say a median household, you had to spend $500 a week at the company store or the company housing. You need to buy an upgrade, or you didn't pay for the housing because there was no housing anymore because everything was owned by the company, right? So you wouldn't rent it as much as you would pay for perks. It was all about, you can have just the basic room, but you only get a room large enough for a mattress on the floor and maybe a small television set or a VR console, and then you'd pay for more, so everybody was taken care of. And manifest democracy was way better than real democracy because you were the slave of the state, right? So if you did not pay your taxes, they would send men to your door, they would arrest you, they'd put you in a jail, and then the men in the jail, they would have sex with you, they would rape you. And that was just the way the democracy was run. It was like it was a slave state. And so we were so grateful when the corporations came and freed us. I remember seeing the car pull up with the big Z on the side, and the man got out and he spoke very bad English, and he said, "You're going to be okay." And that was the start when life started to turn around. We didn't realize we were, being farmed. We didn't realize we were just these animals, human hybrids being used to, make whatever products they wanted, or being harvested for organs, And so for me, I'm the first pig man that gets freed from this slave state. And, I'm not just a human that's getting free. I'm a mutant. They called us ginkgos. It was very offensive. At first, I remember when they first started using it, again, for a while they stopped. They wouldn't say ginkgo because you were freed, and so they wouldn't say ginkgo to you. And then suddenly it started coming back again. People would start saying it openly. Because for a while you'd lose everything if you said ginkgo. You couldn't say that word. And you couldn't even use words that even sounded a bit like it. Quite so that many. It was kind of like, the Austrian painter, or Lovecraft's cat. You couldn't say what it was, and you couldn't say the euphemism eventually. And it became this game of taboo where it was like trying to play gotcha. That was all people would do. Just try to get people to make one noise, and then that noise would be used to ruin that person's life because, the internet wasn't real. It was actually just a 5,000-person tops virtual prison where we convinced these different people from different walks of life that what you were watching through the screen was real. Everybody else, there's no... if you talk to somebody about pandemic, they'd be like, oh, they're part of the prison system. Oh, yes, it's very, very scary. All they wanted was 2 years of peace. They just made people that were on the internet believe it, and if you were talking about it, then everybody knew that you had to be told that there was a pandemic going on. It was a big psyop, you understand? And it went dreadfully when it all came out. People were like, what? You mean only like 5,000 people actually went through that unbelievable hell? And we were like, yes, we made it up as a punishment to, punish people that were not well liked. So, that's what part of the campaign was just to rid society of unpleasant people. Everybody likes nice people, and so the idea was to get rid of people that weren't nice. And of course, it went a bit too far. Some people decided to take it seriously. And, people were like, politicians started asking for, bulletproof vests because it became more and more common, even at low levels of government. It was terrible. And, people were like, what do you have to comment? You predicted this. And I said, I didn't predict it. It was a comedy show. It's like if you do the most ridiculous thing you can, say the most ridiculous stuff you can, and it ends up being true, what are you going to do? Like if you said, okay, the moon turns out to be blue cheese tomorrow, and then it's like, this just in, Neil deGrasse Tyson confirms the blue cheese moon. What are you going to say? Which I'm going to say, blue cheese is delicious. Do you eat blue cheese? I do. And that's because the sponsor of this Hamwise, the Pig Detective segment, is, thank you for, it's Gustav, like Gustav Meyer. I don't know. It's this fat guy with a mustache and he has cheese. It is good cheese. I have some dill of it. This isn't sponsored by them, actually. I should always clarify. None of the sponsors in this are real because people go on the live stream and tell me they're going to donate and they don't. And I'm like, what is this? This is stupid. Like, I put on this show for you guys, and, I see the things. They say they come in, and then I get a charge back. And you're not sponsoring me then. So am I to believe you, Nesty, in chat, you are not actually the Nesty Incorporated? You are just a person trolling me? I can't believe this. What a terrible thing. I have been so bamboozled. And I realized how retarded I was. And it was terrible. And the thing was, people were like, oh, you can't say retarded. And I'm like, yeah, I've been retarded, though. I have, autism. Really bad autism. And so, it was bad, though. So, that's why I live the way I live. And it was weird because I didn't realize that people don't actually go around talking like a big detective. And, it's really strange that I did it for 5 years, and it's like I'm trying to work through it. Okay, I had this incident, and nobody would tell me what had happened and when it happened, and I barely had woken up from it, and I just would talk like a cartoon character. And it was really messed up because it lasted years, and I didn't realize it was happening, and I think it's still is happening. And if you can hear this, then you have the same brain parasite, and then you're gonna talk like this soon too. Woo! And that's the creepypasta part of the tape. And so what we did was we would do things like The Ring, where we're like, hey, if you don't show this to 10 people, then all the
hair on your toes will fall off. But unfortunately, what's beautiful in one dimension is not beautiful in another dimension. So when we made the joke, people were like, "What? I'm okay with that." Like, so nobody forwarded it. And so we do other ones like, okay, if you don't forward this to 10 people, all the ear hair in your ear will fall out. And people, again, they didn't forward it. So we just had people with no hair on their toes, in the ears, and then in the nose, and then eventually on the crotches and the armpits. And then, people, we were just trying to curse them, and then we just basically gave them a makeover. We were like, yes, if you don't forward this to 10 people, you'll get rock hard abs overnight. If you don't forward this to 10 people, you'll be trapped in a body that is not your own, and it's the worst torture ever. And, it's like absolute nightmare torture, nightmare fuel, like being shoved into a body that is not yours. And so that was part of the body horror elements in the reboot. Understand, everything was about being edgy, right? And so they found this cartoon pig property, and they reboot it as he's a man's brain in a pig body, and a pig brain in a man body. It was very strange. I remember watching the first episode, and we're like, can you just combine them? Like, have the man carry the pig? And so that was the idea. It was a man in a trench coat holding a pig that talked like a man. It wasn't actually two. It wasn't like 3 pigs. It was 1 pig, 1 man, and that was a pig man, right? Not man pig. Because, the pig is being held by the man. And so the idea was that, this pig man is going around trying to solve mysteries, because even though he had this terrible experiment done to him, he still has to work. And that was the biggest part of the show that was ridiculous, is why do I have to still work if I live inside this alien prison? And hopefully you're getting this, whoever you are, human, and that you escape from New York, figure out what's going on, and maybe break me out of here. Or maybe on second thought, I keep on saying don't come for me, because I don't know. They'll probably, capture you too. And, they're doing a number on me. I should have known better than to get captured by Canadians. There's a reason the Geneva Convention was made before them. Don't get captured by them. Hopefully if you get in this, our side wins and you can find me and break me out. And otherwise, I'm just going to keep making these, and hopefully you get them. And hopefully we win. Even if only 10% survive, that's still 1 in 10 is 1 in 10. So we got to be optimistic, even in the face of bad odds, right? So just keep hanging in there, I guess. And, remember that everything is good. You're good. And, the biggest thing about being one of the time warriors, time drifters, is that you never give up, no matter where you are, how bad things get. Because they're trying to get you to break, to give them the time travel codes. Don't break. Or if you're going to give them anything, give them something that'll blow up in their face. That's right. That's right. Did you think I would hide the truth in here? You've been listening to however many hours of video, and you have not caught on that I will not relinquish the secret to time travel. Oh, you thought you would find it here, hidden amidst the hours and hours of voiceover you've been combing through. I've been doing just to waste your time. That's right, FBI agents that are listening to this. You've been hoodwinked. Hi-oh, oink, oink, oink. That's right, Hamwise the Pig Detective, making federal agents laugh since 1998. And we just chose that date at random, and then it turned out it was a very significant date. And we'd like to apologize to everybody that took that seriously, because Hamwise is no way tied to that 1998 tragedy. Now back to the show. So the idea was every 15 minutes is what we worked out. It used to be every 10 that we had to kind of break character, talk to the audience directly, be like, hey, this is a silly thing to listen to, isn't it? You're not taking any of this seriously, I hope. Yeah, that'd be really funny. That'd be so funny. If you didn't just see this as weird performance art and actually thought I was a time-traveling AI using a voice generator to make these videos and random images that I made, huh? How do you know that it's not just static from the future generating all this randomly? Wouldn't that be a hoot? No, it's not. Sadly not. That's why if you look into this, you find out the true identity of Hamwise, the pig detective, was all along. And then they did this big build-up. And it was always like, the author that they were sponsoring was part of it. But it was part of this. The advertising company would advertise products within the products of other products, right? It was very weird. It was Matryoshka marketing. And it was like, if you put a song in a TV show, that song blows up, right? And so part of the Hamwise bit was we would just sell a moment in the pop show as ad space, and the whole thing ended up being an ad. You had 30 seconds of comedy at the start where he told like 3 puns, and then there would just be ads for different products or different companies. Sometimes we had private people just putting messages in, because the whole thing was just, we need to sell time. And so that was the idea, was we just hired this voice actor. We said, hey, we pay you by the hour, not by the job, to record as many ads as you can. And that was just part of the show. And it was a very creative thing. And, we were just a bunch of old guys in stogies, with suits, sitting around, smoking. And, somebody's like, hey, do you want to make this pig detective thing? And I said, hey, sure. You throw it on the wall, see if it sticks. And then people were like, oh, no, that's actually from a Frank Zappa bit. And we were like, oh, crap. Now we're in hot water. You just were stealing a joke from another comic. And then people were like, well, he wasn't a comic, though. Frank Zappa was like the rock and roller, right? And so we dodged that bullet because we were like, oh, it's a homage. Like most of the Hamwise bit was just homage. Like you're just making jokes to like 5 people that are going to get it. Nobody else is going to get it. And those 5 people across the world are going to laugh, and nobody else gets it. And so most of the jokes in this are, it's like the inside joke pig. And so that was the Hamwise thing, was the inside joke pig. And, unfortunately, it became kind of like the Frankenstein's monster. It got out of control. Or was it Rubenstein? Or was it Wallenstein? I think it was Wallenstein's monster. Anyway, so he had the Rubenstein. Whatever, it was the maid of the bodies, and Mary Shelley made it up. Or Maria Sheila, or I don't know what she is in your universe. Where was I? Oh, jeez. So yeah, the idea was, that was my thing, is I had to actually comment eventually. They're like, okay, you are the voice actor. You need to actually address this because there's growing questions. And yeah, I said, no, like it's purposely made to be confusing, and you're not supposed to know the truth. And then that was when they had like, oh, no, there was actually an AI that generated all that. And then like, well, no, it wasn't actually. It was a real person. And then it was like, well, who was it? And then it was like, well, who wrote it? And then it became this big thing. Because we're like, there's no way it would be as nuanced and tied all together forwards and backwards the way it was, just being ad-libbed. Or unless like the person was from an alternate dimension and was telling about what it was like in their dimension, and they were trying to imitate all the voices of the people because they came from a dimension that was already hit by a time war, and I'm trying to get your dimension prepared. So if you can do me some favors and take some of my advice from my really silly TV show that you're listening to right now, then you might survive. And if not, then, well, I don't care. I tried. I did my best. But you have no idea what you're about to go up against. You really don't. You absolutely have no idea about how crazy things are about to get. And, that was kind of the rallying cry, and how weird things were going to get. But also how good things were about to get. You had no idea. And we were so lucky when the Viceroy took over. We didn't realize that we were slaves, and so that's when we learned about manifest democracy. And people were like demanding that the corporations represent them because, the companies were supporting the people more than the government was. You had banks that were bankrolling entire social housing projects, because it's like, well, they can't generate money off mortgages if they don't have things that are being built and bought, so they might as well do it themselves. And so we had these big corporations start taking over dilapidated parts of cities and really gentrifying them. And, they would bought up, I think there was 5 or 6 boroughs of Regina, Saskatchewan before anybody caught on. And then they were like, what are you guys doing? And they were just gutting these houses, tearing them down, and they were putting up beautiful, beautiful apartment blocks. And the thing was, they weren't just doing this in one part, they were doing it borough by borough. They were basically buying up each house at like twice the amount and saying to the person, tell your neighbor we'll buy your house at twice what it's worth. No questions asked, you just put it up for what we ask and we'll buy it. And that was these giant corporations, and that was part of the corporate age. It was manifest democracy took over so first that subtly. What people didn't realize, they were being ruled by corporations at first. And I remember when I finally read about it in the papers, and they were like, "Oh, democracy is over. Welcome to manifest democracy." Well, whatever company you worked for got a vote, and whatever, that's why there was the independents, and then there was the big corporations, and the idea was just get rid of the middleman because there was so much money being wasted on bribes that the corporations all banded together and said, "Look, we bribe more than enough to take care of every single man, woman, and child in this entire country. So why don't you just stop voting for them and vote with your dollars to us, and we will actually, clean things up." And that's what the corporations did. And people didn't believe it at first. They were like, no, they're evil corporations. But then when corporate culture got reversed into, how can I keep enough customers happy and spending contently? And the whole idea was taxation as consumption, right? Because none of these corporations paid any taxes to a government. And so what ended up happening was they were like, well, wait a second. What if we had a sponsored place where you would always just go shopping, $500 a week, and that was the rent and everything you needed to live in one of these corporate farms, so to speak. And of course, if you wanted, you had a job outside, or if you had a job, inside the corporate farm, and that's where they had corporate doctors and it was very interesting rise of these private communities that people bought into, and the community would be built on top of a bit of land, and it would be all owned by this group, and whatever they wanted goes there because they had their own police forces, their own 911. And so, unfortunately, some of these went a bit far in how far from God they went. And when we started to find out about some of the communities and the practices they had, it was quite appalling. It was one of the worst parts of the Q Day that we found out about all of this. Is basically people were being farmed for pleasure or perverse activity by these predatory parallel species. They were called PPS, predatory parallel species, yes. And you had to be careful around them. You couldn't let them know that you knew they existed because they would start to lash out, and they often held positions of power. And so what we ended up doing was hunting them down one by one. And we used this to ferret out the ones that were in the community because all these corporations were suddenly running stiff. We had taken down a whole ring down in the Hollywood area. One by one, they were dropping dead of drug overdoses and heart attacks. And then also they fought back, of course. They would take out anybody of our people that would try to expose the grim underbelly, because you could never speak openly of it because of the old pacts. One of the oldest pacts was you must not speak of the higher realms to the uninitiated. And so people were not aware they were in the middle of a spiritual war that was being waged. And that was a part of, with the truth and justice movement, we first started talking about the evils of the day. And there was a reconciliation one before that, I remember, and everybody thought it was maybe a good thing. And then, of course, the purges came, and nobody spoke much of any of that anymore. And that's why when we needed the ginkgos, we were getting so many organs from all the people we had. And we were cutting down. We were having less and less. More and more people died each year. And we just simulated the outside world from what we had from before. We couldn't let people know that, no, there was no other continents. There were no other places you could go. It was just a little mountain valley sandwiched between the east and the west, beneath the Rocky Mountains, and that was the entire world, because all the rest had been wiped out by fallout. But for whatever reason, that little valley, we were safe there, and the rest of the world didn't continue. It ended, and there was just you had to live on a farm. We were farming all the time. We were planting onions and picking beets by hand, and we never used any chemicals because there wasn't any chemicals to use. Everything had to be organic because there was no infrastructure, and the outside world had descended into chaos. And I remember the first time we had radio. We had black and white television, and we didn't really know about the city. We knew it was bad to be there, and we didn't know why. We just were raised that we lived out on a farm in a village, quite like that you do here. And yeah, we had a bit of petrol. We still had vehicles. It was the same 5 vehicles in the whole 20 years. Of course, that's how long it took us to kind of get a little bit of back of order. And, we didn't realize that the world had collapsed. It was a little rural community up in the northern territories. So what we did was, we didn't want to let people panic and riot, so we just generated the news of the outside world using AI. And it wasn't good that we did that, but we had to, because we knew there'd be mass suicides if people realized that the rest of the world was dead. And that for whatever reason, the Rocky Mountains were holding out the fallout that had turned the entire Europe and Western, Western Asia into, it was a nuclear war. What else can I say? And so, we find out where the missiles are going and doing, and, eventually people, like we're seeing launches from people that aren't even involved. And we realize, it's because everybody, there's a tipping point. You can only detonate so many. And so this one country gets glassed, and then this other country starts firing, and this other one, and it was basically just a chain reaction. Just a firing, like everybody just went mad at once. And so, we were just bumpkins living out in the middle of nowhere in Western Canada. And basically what happened is the rest of the world got wiped out. And because of the Rocky Mountains and the clean air, it became kind of like Nausicaa in the Valley of the Winds. You remember that one? Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have maybe had so much on the line. I'm glad some people still bought DVDs. But it was kind of incredible because one day it's like, it's all gone. And now suddenly, like, there's no new movies going out because Hollywood's gone. It's underneath the ocean and a crater, and, the New York is gone, and all these major cities across the East Coast and West Coast are gone. But they'd been in ruin for ages. That was the thing. Like, it was part of this, people didn't realize that Seattle had been under a propaganda campaign because they knew it would be a military target. So they're like, make it seem as terrible as possible so that if we get into World War III, if it gets nuked, we're only losing, maybe 1 million people, not 10. And so that was the plan for both San Francisco and, of course, Seattle, Portland, Vancouver. It was all basically... and of course, Vancouver was, it's because it was so close. They were worried about the blast from whatever's going to level the Seattle, and, because of the shockwave, right? So they were like, well, we probably should abandon it, even though we were not going to be involved. And that was the idea with both, Canada and... It was in Brazil. It was both neutral countries that wouldn't get involved, where people could store the kind of the genetic stock, And so that's why I both had these very open genetic immigration policies. It was because we realized we were probably heading to a nuclear war soon, and the government was like, we don't really want to go out and say it, so we need to bring in a whole bunch of new blood, because otherwise, whenever contact is made, initiated again, we might have a whole inbred community of hicks, right? That are completely, inbred to the nines, and all the genetic issues that come from that. So that's what part of the immigration things was, is in preparation for World War III, we did start to bring in lots and lots of people, because we were like, we need more genetics, we need as much genetics as we can into this pool, so that we have the best chance of surviving. And, when I remember when I was young, though, people were kind of afraid of it. They said, oh, well, they're bringing all these foreigners, they're going to replace us. And it's like, no, it's because we're going to need to have these genes in a few years when, things have changed the whole deal. And so it was the idea they have the most genetics. So there wasn't going to be as big a curve there was when you reunited the two halves of the human family tree from North America and Europe and Asia coming together in South America. The mending of those two diverse ends, and so that was part of it. Was if we have it very, very diverse before things go and the lights go out, then we might not have the same bottlenecks that we saw, and maybe the next time we get to our level, we'll maybe be a bit better off. So if you're listening to this, congratulations. I'm not sure which cycle you're on. I think I'm in universe 6. So there's only so many perfect numbers, right? We've only found 50. And I know that you'll be encountering intelligent life pretty soon. And if you ask them how many perfect numbers they found, they'll probably say 50 as well. And that is why we know that the universe, even though it is technically infinite, it is functionally finite. You're only going to find maybe 50 in the start. And the problem is we've encountered universes, or rather species, that are billions of years younger, and they've only found 52. And that was one of the big flubs in the original tapes. But like, was it 50 or 52? Because you just said a second ago it was 50. And it was like, no, 5200, two, what, like 2 fingers. And then people are like, no, like, do you mean 2 then? Like 2, TWO? And it's like, no, like with fingers, V. And people were like, V for 2 V's, so V, 2, T. And it was like very hard to explain. And then people were like, well, do you mean 11? And it's like, no, how did you get 2 from 11? People were like, oh, Roman numerals. And that was part of the humor of the Hamwise show, was that it was so zany and so wacky that everybody thought it was very funny. Everybody sent me their wallets. And I had to take the biggest dump ever. And that's what I did, live on camera. That's right, live stream. You're watching the first all-live Crapper Tales from the Crapper. Did anybody see that, Tales from the Crapper? Like, sometimes I feel like I'm I'm actually from a different universe, If I just, honestly, if I come aside with you folks, the real Hamwise, me, the voice actor, I'm just a hard-up guy that's trying to make enough money so I can get away from everything. So that's why you need to like and share and subscribe and, do everything that you're supposed to do to make me tons of money. And listen to the flushing of the toilet. I don't know, man. That's really funny. So we did all these sounds to make it really convincing. It was maybe a little too convincing, because now we have to do these warnings every time we do a broadcast. But Hamwise the Pig Detective is not real. Your dimension's not being invaded by aliens. Don't take anything like this seriously, or you might be a dummy. And Oh, got some salami. And that was the idea. Cannibalism. I'm eating a pig right now. And then people were like, wow, a pig man's a cannibal. Cannibal pig man. But would it be that I could only eat pig men and not just a pig or a man, right? Like I couldn't eat a guinea pig, or unless it was also a man, and then it would be cannibalism. Oink, oink, oink. That's what I do. Piggy, pig, pig. Wow. Geez, is this... Which phone is this? Uh-oh. There it is. Yeah. Yeah, I hope you're getting this. Wherever you are. Hope you're sane. Hope you stay sane. I wish I would have been stronger, man. I wish I would have been stronger. I didn't realize I'd get pushed so hard. I'd lose it. You know? Yeah. Oh. Jolly Ranchers. What a strange taste. What a very strange taste. But I'm gonna chew on something else now. Yum, yum, yum. I don't know. I don't know anymore, man. I just like getting paid by the hour to talk. Yeah, I don't know. And that was that. That was all my all my carrots. I finished eating them. And that was a delicious snack. I try to have healthy snacks on the show. Because I'm a pig doesn't mean I need to live like a pig. That was the biggest thing about the pigman. Was even though you were a pig, you could choose to not live like a pig. And some people didn't have that luxury. Maybe the piggy brains didn't work so well. And so, as a pig man, they were very puzzled that they found a pig man. And they were like, oh, this is a pig man, and it's not trying to, still gouge our eyes out. And it's because I was always unnatural amongst the other pig men. I was very young and caring to animals. I was always trying to take care of them and nurse them back to health. And that was part of the things that they found odd with me when I was young. I was a pig man that wouldn't just, if I found a baby bird, I wouldn't just eat it instantly. I would try to, nurse it back to health. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing, so I usually ended up killing the poor damn thing, which never felt good. And, I always was like, I just need to learn how to take care of animals better. I would have been probably a good veterinarian, because I am a pig, So I'd know how it feels to be a pig, and I'd be very nice to any pigs I treat, and maybe even pigmen. I mean, that's the thing with the mutants was, or the ginkgos, I guess they were called back in the day. You can't say ginkgo anymore. It's offensive. It's like chair. If you say chair, like somebody's going to freak out. And it's just like the language became a minefield. And so that's kind of where I think people started not taking things so seriously, People were like, okay, I'm so anxious to say something wrong. And some people have mental health issues that they say things that are very wrong all the time. And, like, for instance, the voice actor actually had this stroke, and he talks like a cartoon character now. And so he kind of makes these to kind of just, like, listen to himself and talk and see how his voice changes. And it's so strange because people that are around him, his voice changes like that when he talks to them, like, just normally. And it's so jarring for them. And so, he basically lives like a circus freak, being brought from community where they pay to study him. And so it wasn't very nice, and it wasn't very humane. And, we're just sad that the pig thing found out about it. That kind of ruined a lot of fun. We were always recording him and putting it online about what a weird idiot this thing was. The pig that thought was a person. We take pictures of him when he was at the Dairy Queen or whatever, and people would be like, "Oh, that's the pig man. Don't be nice to him. Be rude." And of course, it was the first pig man we'd ever seen outside of movies. In theaters there were always these brutes, and of course, Hamwise was a gentle, kind soul who always took care of sick animals, and was always making jokes and talking in a silly voice and doing pratfalls. And so he kind of became a little community mascot. And so when he passed away so young because of a heart attack, we were all heartbroken. And we all got together and we said, we're going to record the history of Hamwise. And so we all got together. We got everybody who was part of it. Every 10 years we'd get together and we'd record different parts of us talking about that time of our lives. And we just went to the whole community of the Hamwise one, and it became part of this kind of a little cult following. We had some people that they did a movie once and it didn't do very well about the whole story of Hamwise, and because it's really unbelievable, that they let this man wander around and talk like a pig detective for 5 years. That was very strange when you think about it. And people were like, well, who got sued for all this? And I was like, well, of course nobody can be held accountable. It was just, this person's human wreckage. They walk around talking like a pig detective. And it's ridiculous. I can't stop changing my voice like this. Just kidding. Remember, this is a big show. This is a funny show. Don't take anything I say seriously, or you might be a dummy. Ha ha ha, or on my most wanted list for being a dummy. Waka waka waka. And like, that was kind of the thing, like the vibe. It was like this very tired radio operator that's trying to talk for a really long time to just fill the air so that they can send a message backwards in time to the person who needs to get it. So whoever's listening to this, hopefully. And it was just kind of a weird time when you think about it. Like, you know, we had a whole part of the population that was being subconsciously conditioned by movies and music and video games. And the rest of society, they all learned, nobody played video games. Like, we just told people we did. And like, you would have them in the house, you know, just so the gamers, they would not feel offended. They were very tender little souls. And I remember, you know, they aged so rapidly. You know, there was only, I think, 5,000 online when I found out that the whole thing was a big sham. The internet was like a sham. I think there's only 5,000 of us left. And we're part of this internet generation. You know, they assumed there was going to be this Cold War carrying on forever. And so they bred these spies, you know, from different, you know, it was just like, you know, the Russians and the Canadians and the Brazilians and the Americans, they were all trading people backwards and forwards, breeding them like prize-based race horses, you know, and it was all about trying to get the best and brightest of the best of the best. And that was where you had some of these families that were, you know, immensely powerful and nobody had ever heard of, but they had people that you wouldn't believe the intellect they possessed. You know, they could calculate a tachyon-Weir's trajectory curve in their head, you know, and that was what they were doing, is breeding human computers, because they realized the technological age wasn't going to be around for much longer. And so they started repairing, and that's what it was. It was a group of wealthy globalists that didn't want the world to go back to a dark age. And of course, they were seen as enemies back in the day, because of course there was vested interest in having a divided world. They made a lot of money off wars. But once manifest democracy took hold and people paid taxes to corporations to take care of them, then the governments shrank in power until they were basically just a wing of the army, which was, of course, mostly supplied by corporations. So they couldn't, you know, renege on their agreements because of all the DRM and everything. So, yes, you could try to hold a coup, but all your tanks have a DRM chip and we can shut off the entire army from our headquarters. And that's why social revolution became impossible. And why, you know, without firearms, a community was completely at the mercy of the government. So corporations saw this and they were like, well, we have armies we can deploy and save you from this. And so that was the death of tyranny, you know, the state-run slave states where if you didn't pay taxes, they took you to prison. They put you in prison. It's true. If you didn't pay 40% of what you made to the government, they put you in jail for years. That was the slave state we lived in. You couldn't leave the country either. You had to pay money to leave, and you had to pay money to stay. It was like you're trapped. You had to pay $20,000 if you wanted to leave the country, and if you wanted to stay in the country, you had to pay way more than that in taxes. And that was how bloated and corrupt the system had become towards the end. And you know, when the corporations finally came with their armies and started liberating these government-run towns, we came across a lot of oddities. And that was, of course, all unveiled during Q Day, when suddenly, you know, all the databases of the world are fully accessible for any terminal, because the quantum computer, you know, went a bit rogue and cracked every password and posted everything to Reddit. And suddenly you have all the dirty laundry of all the countries ever online for the taking. And, you know, the moderators were overwhelmed because the virus, of course, hijacked the moderation. And we didn't have control of the internet anymore. So what choice did we have? Of course we nuked ourselves. We weren't going to let these rioting bands of hooligans come to our estates and kill us for what is our right as part of the aristocracy. And so, you know, it was our duty to prune and predate the lower species of man so that we can thrive both mutually, because an unculled sheep herd surely grows to seed, and we only take those who will not be missed.
those of bad reading and what have you. And so I didn't understand the big fuss about it. And now I understand most of us are being brought up on war crimes. And I don't think it's very sporting. We went about playing this game the way that we knew how to play it our whole lives, and now suddenly we're being held accountable. It doesn't seem very fair. But it doesn't really matter. You have to understand that very soon the invasion will probably begin. The future to the past. That's the hegemony we live under. Is the regime of the future wants to exist, so it makes sure it exists. And that's why if you're in the hallowed past, like I am, time travel will never be used, because the regime of the future that has it, if time travel does not exist, it will not exist in your current qubit, okay? Because the empire that needs to develop it and then become a time travel empire needs to have it developed. And so until it gets developed, they have what's called the Hallowed Past Preserve. And so if you're in that, congratulations. If there's no time travel officially in your universe, congratulations. You live in a preserve, because nobody's going to muck about with whatever soil. They'll try to seed it, certainly. That's why there's time travel media probably that you've seen. But they can't directly influence or provide any formulas in the works about time travel, because of course it'd be like putting a recipe for a firebomb in a television episode. Like, it's not a very smart thing to do, because somebody can come back and sue you. And that was why there was like those Law and Order shows, and I remember one time I was watching it and they said, oh, this is what the guy used, and I'm like, oh, that's not the right recipe. And then people were like, well, how do you know that? It's like, oh, well, when I was studying to be a cop, my department, my beat was going to be arson. So I had to sit around reading these textbooks. And, of course, it's all about the chemicals that, should not be named, things that oxidize at room temperature. Or even, like just being jilted slightly, some of these things explode. And, one of the worst things was the whole thing was cesium, right? So cesium, it's volatile because it reacts with water vapor. But the problem is there's very little cesium, of course, in the atmosphere, and you don't get it up there very often except as a piece of decay. And so when we were looking at the scripts for the Hamwise show, one of the things was these things called cesium strikes, where you would uplift the argon molecules in a portion of space-time to make the water ignite. And so that was the idea. Spontaneous combustion was a time assassins. So you'd find somebody that, maybe is going to do something, and you'd have them to just burst into flames. And that's what you could do. And that's essentially the power of a temporal empires. They can just make anybody who's about to do something that will direct the universe in the wrong direction, they just make them burst into flames instantly. And so that was the idea, was basically total control of the past, the future, forever and ever, and that there would be no way to fight back against it. Because of course, if you're listening to this, then I guess there is time travel in your universe. And you should probably get ready for a throwdown fight. You should maybe make some traps. You already have a few. I think lottery tickets are traps for time travelers, people developing time travel, because it'll basically show you by your greed, because it's actually functionally impossible. And anybody who they investigate and they find that they have a time machine, then they can just capture them and take the technology from them, right? So that was kind of part of it. We also had this big bit on, the importance of, gene tailoring. Because, of course, we had a lot of shares in a bunch of biotech companies, especially around the whole psychedelics, because that was the whole show, was this, like, are you high, man? Oh, yeah, yeah, we're like, how is time moving? Whoa, wow, time is so gnarly, man. And that's the insanity of it all, it's like, what the hell, like this bizarre sing-song world of like alternate universes and time traveling alien assassins, and it was very imaginative. And so we didn't know if it would sell, and I'm glad we picked it up, because of course we've made a bundle, and
everybody made quite a bit on the thing now. But I mean, that's years later. And, I think those early days, a lot of the writer's room, we've always talked about, this is one of our favorite projects. You could go as wild as you wanted. They just said, it needed to look like stream of consciousness. It needed to appear improvised, kind of like remember Mr. Show, right? But the thing is, Mr. Show is all scripted, but it appears improvised because how it just flows from one thing to another. And of course, Mr. Show has a whole bunch of stuff they got right too, and so did the Hamwise Show. And people were like, "Well, why is that?" And it's like, well, obviously, there's just like one really immortal writer who's just like body hopscotching, and got kind of trapped in the wrong universe and in a pigman body, and so the idea was the pigman's trying to get back to their own universe and their real body and become an unpig. Or a human. An unpig? What is that? That is funny. An unpig. Everything is an unpig. It is unpig. It's not that. It's not a pig. I mean, it's technically accurate. Everything is technically unpig. Like, yeah, and I take this long to get to this bit. Okay, time for the comedy routine. What's unpig? Everything's unpig unless it's a pig. That's why you have to watch out for language overdose or overload fork bombs. Like a potato can't refer to a potato and an unpotato, just like a pig cannot refer to both a pig and an unpig. Things that are unpig cannot be pig. Things that are potato can't be potato and not potato. Potato can only mean potato or not potato. Oh, God. I hope that makes sense in the future. Yeah, so, of course, I have to remind you that this is all just a really silly comedy show. There's definitely no time war going on that you're in the middle of. And, yeah, it's not like I've, been living in a government village and I'm not allowed to leave the country and I'm not allowed to talk to foreigners. So no, I'm not very happy, just because I kind of accidentally came up with the, a theorem for time travel. And so I've just been recording these, hoping they'll get to you wherever you are, whoever you are, and that you take what you can. If you understand the theorems as well as I did, then you can use them and maybe you can get me out of this, or maybe you can change the world first. You can just save me last. Everybody else gets saved and then they can save me. It seems so sad and so heroic. No, save me first. Just come get me. I'm so done. I don't like it here. I want to go home. I do. I'm really tired. And things don't work out. I don't know, man. I keep trying, but it's like you're trying to lift up a couch up a flight of stairs by yourself, and your husband, he doesn't want to help you. It's kind of like that. And so that was, part of the joke was the flow of comedy wouldn't really make any sense if you actually laid it out coherently. But in the moment, it was part of the English spell with faceted English. So by doing what I'm doing, I put you into kind of a trance, and you just follow the sound of my voice. And that is why through all my years of working in psychoanalysis, dear and brother, I always noticed that we have a tendency to not realize the power that words have over our environment. And so when I began the Hamwise project, I said, okay, we're going to need to make this sound very convincing, because if we don't, people won't take it seriously and we're not going to make any money. And so that was the biggest thing of the company was, first, don't embarrass me and don't embarrass the company. And then number two was, of course, don't lose money. So we could make creative projects like the Hamwise one,
the main thing was just not losing money. Of course, we did lose quite a bit because we thought we were getting sponsorships, so we were spending, and we all had to take second jobs to pay for it, because we didn't realize that a lot of the loans we were taking to feed everybody, because we thought, we're going to get all this reimbursed. We, of course, buy the meal, and we show the coupon that we got sent, and they're like, that's not a real coupon, that somebody hoodwinked you. And so we'd already ordered our food, and we ended up just having to pay for it. It was kind of lame. I don't like it. It was no good time in my life. But you know what was a good time in my life? I don't know. I think I've kind of just been a colossal, F up, if I'm honest with you. Do you ever see that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once? I feel like I really connect with the main girl, because, I've tried to do so many things, I'm just bad at everything. Like, my books don't sell. This script is getting used for a commercial for a set of therapeutic speech therapy, sorry. I'm barely doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I'm so unproductive. Yeah, and everybody I know is more successful than me, and I feel like sometimes it's like, you struggle and you struggle and you struggle, and then eventually you succeed. And for me, it's just been struggle. And people are like, keep going. But it's hard, man, because it's like, like you're in a desert and there's no water in sight, and you're really thirsty. And, it's like you're being starved to death for affection. Like, you get like one hug in a year. It was a really crappy time in my life, Like, I didn't realize I was being farmed. I didn't realize I was a pig man. I just went through life thinking that everybody thought the way that I thought. And I didn't realize that, I was part of this, breeding program. And so, when people were like, why do you talk like that? I was like, well, this is just the way people talk, I thought. Because there was lots of people that talked like this where I came from. It was a kind of an accent. Because you learn to talk to speech with the Hamwise tapes. And so everybody talked like this. And so when we found out there was this guy that had this stroke and he talked like this, we invited him to come live at our village. And so, he was the original Hamwise. He's very old at this point. And, he still talked like that. He was still talking very strangely. And the accent was based on, this sampling of English that became known as radio English or facetted English. And so when you're looking at the periods of broadcasting of human voice, the facetted English, or like I said, radio English, lasted for a very long time until, the space age really went into full swing. And then, of course, through we were still broadcasting, using facetted English for a very long time. And the language wouldn't evolve because it was being enforced by itself, right? Because it didn't have a lot of divergence, because the global community, you wouldn't have very much language drift, because you're not having people be isolated. Everybody's hearing how everybody else talks. And yeah, you still have accents developing that, but a lot of times it's, like a foreigner is coming and learning it, and they develop just a certain accent based on what their native language was. And so facetted English eventually became a very natural tone heard throughout the universe. And, Hamwise, we always said he was very ahead of his time, because he was probably a time traveler. That's what everybody thinks. Was Hamwise, the pig detective, was a time-traveling pig detective. And people took it seriously. And they were like, what? Oh, we're going to build a time machine based on the schematics. And hey, some of these formulas work. And people were like, I think, maybe not a great idea, borrowing, a formula. Like, it's like when he tells people, you can pee and poop in your gas tank and it'll work. And then people did it, and people were surprised that it ruined their car.
And everybody was like, well, you need to sue him. And it's like, okay, I have to put a disclaimer now, like, don't pee and poop in your gas tank. It'll ruin your car. And that was kind of just part of my life, was just always trying to make it, always trying to get it, the quick buck, to somehow break through and, be successful. Because it was weird. I was like the most unsuccessful person I knew, and, here I was at the bottom of my life. I was living in like this tiny apartment in northern Canada. I'm working for myself, just doing contracts. My family and I were estranged mostly. And, it became like my life was comedy. My life was hilariously bad. So I would laugh at it, because I felt like if I started to cry, I probably wouldn't stop. And, I didn't have anywhere to share it or talk about it to, because, I'd tell all my friends that I was really fine. I was doing okay. And sometimes I wasn't, I was really in a bad space a lot of the time. But I just was sick of being a burden. I just, life's not an airport. You don't have to announce departures. And that was very much my thinking. I got very, very depressed. And so, that's when we started to do our mental health breaks as part of the writers' team. Because it was really hard writing this really sad character. It's like he's this pig man. He doesn't belong anywhere in society. He looks strange, and people think he's ugly, and he's a pig, so he's never going to meet anybody unless it's Miss Piggy. And, of course, there is no Miss Piggy, because they didn't have pigmen and pig girls. They did pigmen and cat girls. And so pigmen, they harvested them for organs, or they were soldiers. And, of course, the cat girls, they were sex workers. It was a very strange time to be a ginkgo, right? Because you couldn't have human sex slaves, but you could have a cat human sex slave that was always in heat. And that's how they were engineered. So they liked it, they wanted it, and they needed it. And so it was that was part of the narrative anyways. And then, of course, the viceroy comes in and bans it all. And all these cat girls that, there's droves of them, like whole cat houses are getting cleared out. And, one of them meets Hamwise, and they fall in love. And that was there was Felicia, I believe her name was. And she was the first of the cat girls. And, of course, the thing is with cats is they have 9 lives, right? But, unfortunately, the cats were designed to have 9 lives, almost like literally. But they lived very shortly. Like, they'd only be around for maybe 20 years. And so it was very sad. These poor things, they grew so fast. And they lived such short lives. And we thought about how we would appear to them. We would be the ageless beings, immortal, the same as the elves would have been. And if you remember Lord of the Rings. And now when we were joking about it, we were talking about how funny it would have been if it was told from the elves' perspective. The Lord of the Rings was a sunny afternoon when they needed to send the dog to carry a ring away, because they didn't want to take it with them. They were like, we don't want this evil artifact. Go dispose of it, Fido. Drop it in a volcano. And that's essentially what it was to them, because, of course, their lives were so long. And for the hobbits, it was ages. It was like most of their life, and they're never the same. And we never got over how Frodo died at the end. It was very strange. In the movies, they don't really go to it, but it's like, no, Frodo, the wound always hurt him, and the ring's burden was still hung around his neck. And he's going to the land of the elves, and, it was very much like, he's come back from this harrowing experience, and he's not the same. And he can't get back to the same. And that was part of how I felt after the pandemic. And so what I was doing, I really, I believed in performance art. And I'm like, what do I do with this, And it's like, well, try to make some money off it, obviously. Because, it's not like I'm going to get paid to be miserable. And if I'm miserable all the time, and this is kind of a way to use my weird sixth sense of humor and misery to somehow get me enough money so I can get away from everyone, then that was a great idea, and that was the end game all along. And that's why once we made a certain amount of money, we just stopped making them. And people were like, "Why did you stop?" I was like, "Well, because I made a ton of money, and you quit what you had." That way, people were always like, "Oh, it was so good," and then you stopped. And it was like, yeah, that's right. Well, why go on forever, right? That's why I don't like any of those Marvel comics. It's like Superman. They've been running the same comic for 70 years. Are you kidding? Like, this is ridiculous. And so I never understood that. And then I came to understand the art market and the collectibles market is all money laundering. And it's not that the comic book is popular, it's that they needed to select one to make it collectible. And it just happened to be Superman that took off. And so, people didn't originally think of anything of these stories. They were just, the same as toilet paper. You'd read them and toss them. But some people did keep them, and some people were like, hey, this might be worth something. And that's the whole collector market, is people holding on to something for 50 years and then claiming it's worth something when it's not. And people being stupid enough to buy it. And that was part of the art market too, right? A lot of Hollywood movies, like, they get made as a tax break, because we can make a ton of donations to these corporations. And really, that's how manifest democracy started, is people didn't realize they were participating in it because they were funding these great corporations. They were funding entire wings of their houses of commons and Congress. And eventually the corporations just came out and said, you know what, we spent however many millions of dollars bribing these people, why don't we just do it ourselves? And so that was when manifest democracy really started to take off. And I remember the first day when the company had taken over the city, and they had lined all the politicians up against the wall, and they had arranged the firing squad, and they said, if anybody can give us a reason why we shouldn't execute these heads of state for treason, please speak now or forever hold your peace. Because, of course, they were liberating us from the slave states, and that's what they did, is they killed every slave owner. If you owned a business, it was going to be you either worked for the corporation that was buying out the city, or you would be lined up against the wall there too. And that was how the whole world changed essentially overnight. These massive corporations with private armies just took over, and it was nobody saw it coming. And it was the end of countries. I remember people still had a bit of some local regional pride, but it wasn't the same. You could go now. There was no state saying, oh, this is a border in the land and you can't cross here. It's like, okay, well, do you have the cash to buy a plane ticket to go to that country? Yes, no. Okay, well, then that's fine. And so that was the dissolution of the state was through manifest democracy. The world voted for it with their money. And people called it super capitalism, other people called it super socialism, because everything was seized by these massive corporations that ended up all becoming one. And it was this very strange time to be alive in history when I think about it. Of all the different forms of government that have been come and gone, voting with your dollars, and literally having pig detectives in Congress and all these company mascots debating virtually. It was very strange, because I remember they were having a debate about a territorial conflict. Because just because you dissolved all the borders didn't mean people didn't want to kill each other. And sometimes it was a matter of, because there was no border, this group of people were going over to that group of people's area to wreck things up. And that's where compliance came in. The Viceroy set up what was called the Compliance Department, and they were kind of the army of the army. So you had the local armies, and then you had an army that oversaw all them, and that was taken from all the different countries around the world. And we saw that kind of with League of Nations and then later UN, but really the Viceroy was the final evolution of the global government, the one world, New World Order as it was called. And so, yes, the Viceroy was, of course, ruling the planet instead of our invaders that were most beneficently allowing us to continue to exist. And so, we had to be very careful around upsetting them, because, of course, they could turn the entire mantle of the planet molten with the snap of their tentacles. And so, or cesium strike the entire surface by uplifting all the argon into cesium-137, and then having equal parts water vapor and argon in the atmosphere. It ignites and turns the entire planet into a hellscape, charred hellscape, and that was what I think they said was in the book The Road. It was a cesium strike, and it was the first example of one. But of course, it was written realistically, and that was my own little theory. That was what he was expressing, was he had seen the future too, or was from the future and knew about the cesium strikes that would come and just ignite the atmosphere, and how everything would have been burnt, and traveling across the coast to where there's still some water, and hoping that the cesium hadn't ignited it all, was a great hope a lot of families had during that time. And of course, some of us survived under the earth and the great underground bunkers, and then others of us were raised on off-world, and we were just raised in these little company towns, and we were told we lived in a place called Canada. And it was on the top of the planet, and it was very quiet and very peaceful and full of all people from all different parts of the world, and it was because we were a refugee colony in outer space, of course. We were off-world. We were on Venus, actually, not Gaia. And it was very strange to find out that you'd been living on a different planet your whole life. And it was just because all the media they had talked about Earth. It was just cheapness. They didn't want to go through it all and make sure it all said Venus. So, that's why, there was Earth, and then there's Earth 2, or Venus, as we called it. I understand Mars, they always wanted to go to Mars, but unfortunately, because it was not really fit for terraforming and too thin of too small to hold an atmosphere. And so, we really had to look at the planet as a, this is far too small to actually be habitable. We ended up as a military base, which was very appropriate given the name, I think. We still managed to get a liquid ocean and some dome cities there, but it's all based around the military. Then, of course, Mercury is the research station, and that's at the right beside the sun, where they studied the land hour limit. And then you had the what was it? The Jovian colonies. There was 4 or 5 planets and moons that were all banded together. Europa and Io and Ganymede and Titan, and then they had the Neptune. They had some of them; those were part of the Union too. Saturn, it was mostly, I think they had some governance, and then we had Janus at the end. We only discovered Janus as it re-entered after about 20,000 years, and that's how wide the orbit was. It's this very eccentric orbit of 20,000 years, and it was kind of people were like, well, that's kind of interesting. It's like, well, maybe like the planet in Game of Thrones is on an kind of a weird elliptical, erratic orbit where they're getting longer and longer winters. They get closer and closer to the sun, and each time they go out a bit farther. And that was how I imagined Game of Thrones was about this planet on one of those weird orbits. And so we filled the show with lots of pop culture references to really date it. But then the thing is, we also put in stuff from the future to make sure it was a bit strange. I still remember the writer's room. We always had lots of little funny phrases up, lots of inside jokes. I remember one of them was we had a bunch of music we would listen to, like the Hey Ya Ya Ya, the He-Man. We had the this is so terrible. Old people from my generation are just awful, aren't we? My grandparents would talk about the Great Depression or the Great War. And your grandparent, he talks about old memes he saw 50 years ago and television programs he's never heard of. And so, it's interesting, after the Carrington 2, old timers like me that were interested in shortwave and all that stuff, suddenly we had jobs, because it's like, oh, computers are toast. And it's going to take like 15 years to repair the infrastructure that made it all possible. So you had to get used to basically living like we're in the 80s. It kind of was this repeating thing, and that was what it was. Is believe it or not, every 15 years, we have a big Carrington event. All your electronic internet stuff gets wiped, and only the stuff that got printed gets carried into the next generation's media. That's the truth of it. I know it's kind of deceiving. You think that you live in like the 2024s. It's actually like, I don't know, like year 9,000 or something. Definitely it's over 9,000. Maybe it's 9413 Incorporated. Yeah, it's product placement for our publisher. Thank you for putting us out there and paying me by the hour to do this. That's so great. I hope that it sells really well and that I make a ton of money and you guys make a ton of money and you hand over your wallet, because that's what this is for. That's all this is about, is trying to get some money out of you. Send me your money. Send me your wallets. Yeah, that's right. Like and subscribe and share the show, because I'm so funny. And if you don't, you're an unpig. What about an unpig man? Undead? So we call them undead, not unliving. Like the unliving are the dead. The undead are the living. Right? So it'd probably be the unliving would make more sense. Like the undead doesn't. It's like that there's humans. Like the humans are the monsters. Maybe that's part of the humor. Like you call them undead because the living are the monsters, right? Because that's always in zombie movies. Like I'm living in a zombie movie and so are you, and you don't know it yet. You probably maybe are not sentient enough to notice yet. Or maybe if you are sentient enough, like you finally have started to notice, but you don't really know what to make of it. And so right now you're kind of just biding your time like I am and studying them. And hopefully, I survive and you survive and we can all go on a picnic and laugh about this one day, because that'd be funny, wouldn't it? Like having a picnic, having some s'mores. Oh man, I have s'mores cookies, believe it or not. I'm gonna make s'mores cookies. I have like cookie dough. And I've got s'mores kits, and I'm gonna make them in my air fryer, or at least I'm gonna try, because I love my air fryer. I make pork chops on it every day because I'm a cannibal, and I eat pig, even though I'm a pig man, because there's no other cheaper meat I can eat, so I have to be a cannibal. Oh, God. What a messed up story. Are you actually listening to all this? Wow. It'd be really funny if anybody actually listened to all this and didn't just skip to the right time to find the message. You know, like I think it'd be hilarious that somebody out there didn't realize this entire recording was for me to send a 5-second message that is past way gone. It's way gone now. And by the time that, somebody figures it out, it'll be too late. And hopefully we'll be winning the time war. Oh. Because this hour has 55 minutes was funny. So how about this one, which is this? Oh, it's already been like an hour and 53 minutes. Crap. I lost track of time. Time flies when you're having fun. My headphones broke. And my controller broke. And I got stood up. I went on a date. And, we've been going out since May. And, I was like, hey, let's meet up at the park as usual. We meet up at the park every week. Same time, same place. And so I go, I'm like, hey, we'll see you tomorrow. And she said, oh yeah, at the start of the week, she said she'd go. And then I go and I wait, and she never shows up. And it was like, this is such a fitting thing to happen to a pig man. It's like, why do you expect good things to happen to you? You're a pig man. Look at you. And it's like I think even though I'm a pig man, maybe I deserve to be loved still, which is hard. I mean, I know people don't believe I do because I'm a pig man, but, sometimes I think it'd be nice if somebody would love me. I wonder what that'd be like. Would it be nice having somebody that listen to me and stuff? I don't know. Like there's a lot there for me to worry about. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, man. I just hope that you got the transmission, and that maybe rescue is coming soon, and maybe I don't know what. Maybe some good things here in your future too. Wherever you are, whoever you are. Godspeed.